Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Elas il-Kor Sadistic Pilgrim sent to us by Josh. Josh says that the deck doesn't really work that well, a lack of win conditions, life gain is minimal, just feel like Elas isn't being utilized enough. Absolutely. We'll see what we can do here. This deck, also, they've said they have no budget. Not really is what they've said, so we'll still try to be somewhat in the budget zone. But this deck is right up my alley. I love white-black aristocrats. I've used Elas il-Kor as a commander. We'll have a nice, quick session after that really long one to go through this deck and give you some suggestions. As always, this deck list will be in the video description below. And while you're looking in the video description, you'll find a link for you to submit your own decks to this channel so that I can look at them and help you improve them. And a link that if you want your deck to be the next one I look at. So, who is Elas il-Kor and why are we using them as our commander? Well, Elas il-Kor, Sadistic Pilgrim, is what we would call a Blood Artist effect. What does that mean? Well, she's 2 mana, a Phyrexian Core cleric. I actually assume it's a she. I tend to conflate them with Eiley, who is also very much so a core that has turned to the dark side that's 2 mana and worshiping the invaders that are taking over their plane. So in my mind, they're kind of the same person, which is why I assume Elas il-Kor is a lady. But Elas il-Kor is a 2/2. They have Death Touch, and then they have two different kind of triggers. One we like a lot, and one we kind of like. The first one is when another creature enters on your side of the battlefield, you gain a life. This is fine. This is what we traditionally call a soul sister effect, where this card will gain us life as we play creatures out. This can be a lot of life, this can be a little bit of life. And then our second ability is whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So, what's going on here is a good question. These two cards, these two lines of text, I should say, do very different things. One of them is a Zulaport Cutthroat effect. The other one is a Soul Sister effect. Is there a deck where we want to run both? And technically there is, but I'm a big believer that generally you want to focus on the one that, defeats your opponents as opposed to the one that, you know, cushions your life total. Now, don't get me wrong, life gain black-white decks are really, really strong, and they focus with a lot of triggers and a lot of effects that grow their creatures and their board states to use that life gain as a means of getting other things to defeat their opponents. However, that doesn't jive with other strategies as well. Life gain requires quite a bit of a commitment in order to get what you want out of it. Whereas the aristocrat effect, sorry, the blood artist effect of whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, that works really cleanly with a ton of effects, namely you attacking your opponent's life lowering. All of these things, like, this constant pressure on their life totals works well and can win you games. So we're generally going to focus on the second ability. Why do we use Elas il-Kor as our commander? Well, as mentioned before, Elas il-Kor can be played in Aristocrats decks as another copy of Zulaport Cutthroat, for example. What that means is that we're taking one of these effects that we like to use in the deck and we're putting them as our commander so that we always have access to them. I think this is a pretty good idea. I think this is very, very strong because it allows us to get going from the start, and because their other ability, cushioning our life total, is just another good passive. I think we're going to have a pretty good time with it. And finally, I will say another reason I do really, really like this commander is that they are 2 mana. As mentioned earlier, I had a lot of fun playing Eiley. Eiley is a really, really fun commander, and Elas il-Kor for the same reason is a fun commander because you get them out turn 2 every game. People underestimate the power of having a low mana commander, and Elas il-Kor is no exception to that rule. So before we go a little further, let's take a look at our curve. And our curve is a little bit lopsided. We have a lot of cards at the 3 mana slot. And then 4 mana goes a bit down, 5 mana goes a bit down, and then we have a lot of 6 drops. Now, Spectral Possession is technically a 3 drop, but even then, I feel like we have too many 6s. We'll do a quick little breakdown of cards, and when we do, we will harp on some of these high mana cards to kind of reduce them and even out the curve a little bit. So Josh says that the deck doesn't really work that well, and I can kind of see why. It does really feel like this deck is in between several different decks at all times. It doesn't really have a cohesive identity, and it doesn't know what direction it's going in. Also, we're lacking a little bit in card draw, so the cohesion of the deck can be a little clumsy. And with so many high mana drops, sometimes if we draw into the wrong half of our deck, we find ourselves really, really far behind because we're stuck basically attacking with a 2/2 and hoping to get tokens out. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to overhaul the deck. And the main things we're going to want to do is there's 3 elements at play here, mainly. There is the, let's say, the aristocrat strategy of using cards like Carrion Feeder, Blood Artist, and cards to sacrifice. We have the token strategy, which is creatures that we can put out en masse, attack our opponents with, but also works really well with the aristocrat strategy of eating those creatures to deal damage. And then finally, we have a life gain strategy. And I'm going to say we should put the life gain strategy on the lowest tier. We're going to not try to think about it too much. A lot of our life gain is passive, and we should just take advantage of that. Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, these cards will gain us a lot of life just passively. Elas il-Kor will gain us a lot of life just passively. We don't need to think about it, so we shouldn't really be investing into it. Don't worry too much and just have a good time. So after that, we're going to try to build the deck with three card types in mind: token producers, sacrifice outlets, and blood artist effects. The rest of the general stuff like ramp and card draw will fit and removal will fit in, but those are the 3 kind of main cards we're going to want to go into. Because at the moment, we do have a lot of token cards that work with tokens, but they're not universally at the same power level. So we need to kind of find which ones we like. So let's start with the high mana cost because we can probably cut some out there and work backwards from there. So else, all these cards are really, really strong, I will say, straight off the bat. Once again, Spectral Procession is a 3 mana card. It is a very powerful card, so let's not worry too much about that. But all of these cards are very, very good. But I would like to just keep the Planeswalkers. Elspeth's Sun's Champion is a phenomenal token producer. 3 a turn is just really, really nice, and her -3 that can be activated right away is a board clear that often does not affect this deck because you are a token deck. So already really, really strong. Liliana is fantastic as a token producer, a sacrifice outlet that affects you less because you have tokens to sacrifice, but also a pseudo blood artist effect that says whenever your creatures die, you draw a card. Great. The other ones, not so much. Darian, King of... Oh, I can't pronounce that. Darian is only good when you take damage. I don't think this deck is particularly good at damaging itself, and even then, you don't particularly want that. And should your opponents attack you with really, really big creatures, with Darian out, either those creatures are going to be lethal because they're not attacking into you just to give you tokens, or, it's going to be a situation where they'll deal with Darian, or you're going to need to block them. So I don't think Darian is very, very good in a deck like this. It can be cool. I played against a Purphoros deck last night, and the idea of getting 2 1/1s every time they pinged me sounds pretty cool, but it wouldn't have saved me in that game. I would have still lost because all those 1/1s would have been meaningless in the end from all of the damage that's coming your way. This doesn't prevent damage. It only kind of buffers you from further combat damage by giving you blockers. Too much mana. I don't like it. Let's get rid of it. Felidar Sovereign is a card I really, really don't like. It's a 6 mana card that if no one's touched you the entire game, and then you play this and no one touches you for an entire turn, you win the game. Uh, that's okay. I don't think anyone really has fun with this card. And then if you play it and you're under 40 life and you manage to eke up to 40 life on your upkeep, it'll win you the game, assuming no one interacts with it. And that's 6 mana for a card just to die is particularly bad. If I wanted 6 mana, discard one of my opponent's removal spells, I would never play it. That is a card that just doesn't have enter the battlefield effect. It doesn't affect the board in any way. It's just there to die. And sometimes, yes, you will get a free win out of it, but it's neither a satisfying win nor does it really support the deck. So I would say cut this card easily. Sun Titan is really interesting here because though it is generally a good white card and a good top of the line card, especially in sacrifice decks, you're very much into the token plan. And with that in mind, I want to cut Sun Titan because you can't get back Spectral Possession, for example, and that is a really good card, right? You have cards like yeah, you could get your Bitter Blossom back, but that doesn't have the same kind of oomph as like getting I don't know, a Flicker Wisp or an Eternal Witness or any other kind of. Both of those cards are redundant, I realize now. They both either blink Sun Titan or get another card back. But, you don't have a lot of ETB draws or things like that that really matter. And though it would be cool to get back your Welcoming Vampire, I don't know if it's really where you want to be. I would cut Sun Titan for now and move on. Let's take a look at the 5 mana cards. This is interesting because these cards very much so they're like a clumsy group together. Beacon of Unrest is a reanimation spell. You are not a reanimation deck. If you want to have a bit of reanimation because you're in black and you have access to it, you should play reanimation or animate dead or one of the much lower mana ones. Beacon of Unrest's ability to consistently reanimate targets as long as you keep getting it out of your deck don't belong in a deck like this and is too much mana and is an easy cut. By invitation only is really interesting. I do like it here and I want you to keep it because you can play around it really well. You just have to remember this doesn't defeat opposing token decks. And that might not be a problem, but it's worth considering. Now, this might not the reason it might not be a problem is that maybe you're ahead of the other token deck and you don't mind, or you are relying on the fact that your other opponents will use their own board clears to deal with both you and the other token deck, and therefore you'll be safe to not worry about it. I don't know how sound that is. It is dependent on your play group. If you have very few token decks, this is really good. If you have very high token decks, this is very bad. But if you have the most creatures, by invitation only is a fantastic selective board clear that gets around indestructible, hexproof, all of that jazz. It's very good. So I do like that. Also, obviously, with Blood Artist on the field, this does just so much damage, and it's so good. With all your Aristocrats effects, it's so good. So absolutely great. Ink Shield. Ink Shield is I really like Ink Shield. I have a really hard time not advocating for Ink Shield. And if you go down to like 2 5 mana spells, I'll let you have Ink Shield. But I think that's not going to be the case. So I'm not too keen on Ink Shield is really good when you can make a ton of mana or hold up a lot of mana. And most of your instants are pretty low mana, and it's not often that you want to hold up mana. So Ink Shield feels a little weird, but don't get me wrong, Ink Shield is a phenomenal card. And I use it in a lot of my aristocrat strategies because it just wins you games. And I do really like that. However, with the setup that you have, I'm I'm hesitant. I am hesitant. I'm going to say keep it for now, but be a bit critical on it because it is a lot of mana in your deck that kind of needs that mana for more proactive situations. Black Market is really good. It kind of answers that question of where you're getting the mana from, but it's kind of slow to set up. Still very strong. I would definitely keep playing it. Make sure to, time your sacrifices accordingly to make the most of it immediately. Divine Visitation. I don't love Divine Visitation. Divine Visitation is either really good or really, really bad. If you were to play a few more of these Bitter Blossom effects, I know there's at least one more you can play that makes army tokens per turn. And I think there's a few others that are like, you are playing Ophiomancer. I think the more of these effects you play, the better Divine Visitation gets. But I'll leave that up to you. The fact that it has almost no synergy with your commander and can't really, you know, require so many other things to work just to make 4/4s. Because let's remember that like it doesn't make you less susceptible to board clears. If you're only creating one token with a card, Divine Visitation isn't that great. Like it has, it's very, very specific that for it to be good. And 5 mana is a lot for that. So I'm suspicious of this card, but it can be very good. My ordering would be by invitation only, Black Market, Ink Shield, and then if you're going to play the fourth one, Divine Visitation. Whew, how are we doing on time? Okay, not too bad. So let's take a look at our 4 drops. Elenda Dusk Rose is okay. I'm not going to be too picky on it because it's a really, really fun card in a deck like this, but it you might have to get a little lucky to get the right numbers out to get her to be really big, but when she's good, she's so good. Mirkwood Bats is fine. Mondrak is okay. I don't really love it here because not everything produces tokens, but when it's good, it's really, really good. I think Mondrak is a lot better when your commander makes tokens, so you have a guaranteed way to take advantage of it, but it's still fun. I think I'd very much so like, what are they called? Phyrexian Horde. Oh, I thought they were gods, but let's say indestructible counter and say Phyrexian. So of the gods, the Phyrexian gods, I think Drivnod is the one you want to play, even though it's 5 mana and I want low 5 mana cards, because it's just so much stronger with your aristocrat setup, and it works directly with your commander, as your commander has a death trigger on it. So I like that a little more, but I do see Mondrak being very, very good as well, so I'm not going to be too hard on it. Release to Memory is kind of like a worse Ink Shield, where you have to hold up mana for it to be good, and I don't think that's the kind of deck this is, so I would easily cut this. It can be very, very good, but I don't think it's very, very good here. Aetherflux Reservoir feels a bit strange as it is a life gain payoff, but it's a lot of work in this deck for it to get going. And you know, this deck might not be able to hold itself up at 50 mana really, really well. Like this is a card that's good for decks that can cast a bunch of spells in a turn, get to like 70 mana, and then use its ability. Whereas this might get you to like 55 with all the Blood Artist effects amidst the pressure from your opponents, and then you like, what are you going to Aetherflux Reservoir someone and put yourself at 5 life? I don't think that's really, really good. Your opponents are gonna pressure you out of the game, and yeah, you'll take one of them out, but the other two will take you out very, very quickly. So I don't think it belongs here. I would cut this. Court of Grace is interesting. Uh, it's a little much for a Bitter Blossom style effect, but it gives you the Monarch. It gives you things to defend yourself to keep the Monarch, and then as you're the Monarch, it gives you Angels. I do like it. I think this is a good inclusion here, and I would keep it for sure. All right, really quickly, we're going to go to the threes and the twos. Well, the threes mainly because this is the highest one. So I just want to see anything that we can cut really, really quickly. We'll go bottom to top. Restoration of a Django seems to be being played for its opposite side that creates 1/1s. That's a lot of work to create 1/1s. You can cut this card pretty easily. Profane Procession is to exile creatures and then it taps for mana and reanimates those creatures you exiled. The mana cost for this ability is absurd. In order for this to do anything, you have to have 8 mana the turn you play it. And then after which, you need 5 mana to exile a card every turn. That's not particularly good. That is a lot, a lot, a lot of mana. You are not a mana producing deck. Don't worry about this. It could be really, really cool where you can, chain a bunch, but you need a lot of mana to chain more than 3 under this deck because you have to keep putting them on the stack so that they're all exiled with this card. But even then, I don't know. It's not going to happen. You only get 3 removal with it. That's 15 mana. You don't have 15 mana. And the backside, I don't think it's exactly what you want, so don't worry too much about it. Ghostly Prison is a card that beats your deck. It is not a card that goes into your deck. You have blockers. You have tons and tons and tons of blockers. That's the token deck for you. You do not need Ghostly Prison. And like I said, people are playing this against you for your sheer numbers of creatures. You have sheer numbers of creatures to block. So easy cut. The Book of Exalted Deeds also feels a little weird, though I will admit because it's a 3/3 for 3 mana. Sorry, a 3/3 every time you gain 3 life. That's very doable, and therefore I'm not going to be too hard on it. If we are playing it for its first ability, I think we are pretty happy. If you are playing it for the second ability, don't play this card. um, this is not one-on-one. In Commander, there are very much ways for players to take out permanents. So you can't really depend on the fact that you can smuggle a angel counter. What is it? Enlightened counter onto an angel and keep it. It's just not going to happen. But the first half is pretty good, and if you can every time, what it reads as is every time you play 3 creatures with your commander out, you get a 3/3. Plays well with your commander. I like it. Your mana rocks could be diamonds. Your diamonds would the what are they? Charcoal diamond and I forget the white diamond. Let's look them up. Charcoal diamond and marble diamond both tap. And then even then, I don't think you're playing all of the 2 manas you can be. Orzhov Signet, the other one is Talisman Min of Hierarchy, which is probably what you should play first. And then after, if you want more, play the diamonds. The 3 mana ones are just too much. Teferi's Protection is great. Soul Shatter is great. Idyllic Tutor is interesting. I don't know which one you're really looking to get, but I think it's fine. I think using it to grab like Divine Visitation makes Divine Visitation better, but I think more than often you're just going to grab one of your Bitter Blossom effects and put that into play. And for that reason, I think that's fine. Welcome to Vampire is great. Vito is great. Vargoth is close. It's a lot of work for Vargoth to do something in a deck like this, but that being said, I'm not too worried about it. Throbbing Doomsayer is great, just creating a token each turn. Ophiomancer is great. Nadir is great. Mentor of the Meek. These are all good. I like all of these. Kaya Geist Hunter is another, like, it's a weird card, but with your tokens, like I've played this in other types of token decks, like non-creature tokens, and I don't like her. But in a creature-based token deck, it's good. I wish she would give all of your tokens +1/+1 instead of a +1/+1 counter on one of them. But she doesn't, so I don't really love her. Her -2 can be really strong when you have Spectral Possession, but otherwise, by the time you can trigger her, most of your token generation has already happened on upkeep, so I don't love her. If you really want a token support Planeswalker in black and white, I would probably play Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, or Sorin, Solemn Visitor. Both of those are very good, and I think are just going to be a little better than Kaya. All right, I'm not going to pick too much on the 2/1 drops. I think you could play more of them, but I'm going to switch to the cards I'd like to suggest, and then we can finish this video off because my suggestions are going to be rather quick. So nice and easy, I want to suggest more on the aristocrat side and more on card draw. Nice and simple. On the aristocrat side, we need at least one more sack outlet, which is Viscera Seer, which is very good, just like Carrion Feeder. You'll be very happy to be eating your creatures that way. If you want more, there's a few others that you can play, but this is already exactly the direction I want you to go into just by having 2. Your creatures are gonna die anyways because you're gonna be attacking and blocking with your swarms of tokens. So you don't need the same amount of sack outlets, but when you do have a sack outlet, your deck is just gonna come together. So nice to play at least one more. And I believe you're playing the altars. You're playing Phyrexian Altar. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe with Phyrexian Altar, I'm a little happier with Ink Shield because I am recognizing that allows you to cast Ink Shield. I was thinking of Ashnod's Altar, which makes it harder, but I would want to hold on to my creatures and not be forced to use them for mana. All right, so let's see then what Blood Artist effects that you're missing. And I'm going to suggest 4 of them. The first one is Cruel Celebrant. Very, very nice. Just another effect, works just like our commander. Just nice. Very, very good. After that, we have Bastion of Remembrance, which comes in with a token and then triggers off all your creatures. Very good as well. Falconwrath Noble is our 4th one. Now it's like a Blood Artist, so it targets the opponent, but it will help just do a little extra damage, which is really nice. And finally, our last one is Sir Conrad the Grim. Once again, very, very strong card. Just represents so much damage over time and has additional benefits with creatures leaving graveyards into exile or out of the graveyard onto the battlefield. He also works as a mana outlet. Sorry, my brain just shut off. This also works as a mana sink in order to spend extra mana to get extra triggers, which can be really good. The thing with these Blood Artist effects is that in multiples, they get really, really, really good. When you have 3 of those, every one of your tokens, when it dies, will drain 3 across the board. I say that with the Blood Artist one on screen. I should say use this. With 3 Cruel Celebrant type effects, every single one of your tokens, once it dies, drains 3 across the board. That's 9 damage when you really think about it. And then when you start counting your tokens that way, you realize you have so much potential for damage that at a certain point in the game, you've just accidentally put yourself into the win by being able to attack opponents and then sacrifice creatures repeatedly, get enough triggers, and you win. So definitely play the rest of them. And then the regular collection of black card draw is really good here. Knight's Whisper to draw 2, lose 2, or if you want Sign in Blood is a bit cheaper, but both of them are very good. Read the Bones is one of the best draw cards in black. Absolutely play it. And then Phyrexian Arena continues to be very, very cheap. Please pick them up if you haven't already. Very nice black extra card draw a turn. And then I'm going to suggest Greed, just because it'll give you something to do with that black market mana. You're gaining a lot of life. You might as well be spending it. When you are playing black-white, you do not want to just gain life. You want to spend it. You do not want to have infinite life. I say that, and my last Eiley deck was about having infinite life, but it also was about spending that infinite life, so I'm not going to be too mad about it. But Greed is a fantastic outlet for your extra black mana, draw cards, pay the life that you've gained. You'll have a great time. All right, I hope this deck assist was useful to you. I think this deck is kind of in an early phase of several kind of builds. Now, if you were to stop, because I did notice this deck is called Life Gain. It just doesn't act like it. So if you were to say, well, Cursed Deck Builder, I like the direction you went with this, but I really wanted to go more into the Life Gain deck, send this deck back again. And just make a note of that. And we'll take a look at it on the other direction, because this can be a Life Gain deck. It's just going to be almost completely different. So it's just going to be a very, very different deck. If you'd like me to send me that draft, there is a link in the video description below. And if you'd like me to look at that deck next, so you don't have to wait in the lineup, there is a link for that too. If you could like, comment, subscribe, I would be very, very grateful. And honestly, I think this has the means to become a very, very good deck. Elas il-Kor is a lot of fun as a commander. And I think with a bit of a fix on the fluidity of the deck and the aims of the deck, you're going to find it to be much more successful. All right, good luck.